It was one of those mornings when everything seemed too quiet before a storm. The old clock on the wall ticked loudly in the small apartment, and the smell of instant coffee filled the air. A single dad sat at the tiny kitchen table, nervously checking the time on his cheap phone again and again. Today was the big day, the interview he had been waiting for months. He had polished his shoes the night before until they looked almost new, ironed his only good shirt 3 times, and even practiced what he would say in front of the mirror. He wanted to get it right this time. He wanted to make his little boy proud. In the small bedroom, his son was still asleep, wrapped in a blanket that was a little too short. The dad stood at the door for a moment, just watching him breathe. That little face was his whole world. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every job rejection, it all came down to this small boy who trusted him more than anyone else. He whispered softly, "Dad's going to make it today, buddy. I promise." He left a note beside the bed telling his son he had made breakfast and would be back soon. Then he slipped into his worn-out jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The air was cold and the city streets were already busy. Cars honked, buses roared past, and people hurried toward their own lives. His old car was parked by the corner, the same one that had given him trouble 100 times before. But he had faith in it today. He patted the steering wheel like an old friend and whispered, "Just one more ride, okay?" The engine coughed twice before it started, and he smiled in relief. He checked his folder again. The printed resume, the ID card, the cover letter, everything neatly placed inside a plastic file. The company was across town, and he needed to be there by 9. If all went well, he would finally have a stable job, a steady paycheck, and maybe even health insurance for his son. It wasn't just an interview to him, it was hope. But halfway down the road, hope began to fade with the sound of sputtering. The car jerked, coughed again, and stopped right in the middle of the street. He tried to restart it again and again, but nothing worked. Drivers honked angrily behind him. Someone yelled for him to move it. His hands shook with frustration. He pushed the car to the side with all his strength and checked the time. It was already 8:30. Panic rose in his chest. He couldn't afford a taxi. The bus stop was 2 streets away. He looked down at his worn-out shoes and sighed. Then he started to run. He ran past shops, through crosswalks, past people who barely noticed him. His heart pounded in his chest and sweat ran down his face. All he could think about was his little boy waiting at home saying, "Oh, Dad, I know you'll get it this time." He reached the busy intersection just a few blocks from the company when he saw something that made him stop. An old woman stood by the side of the road, holding a small grocery bag. Cars sped past, horns blaring. She tried to take a step, but her cane slipped and the bag fell from her hands. Apples rolled across the street and she bent down to pick them up, trembling. People walked past her like she was invisible. A few even stepped around her groceries without looking. He froze for a second. His mind screamed, "You're late. Keep going." But his heart whispered, "She needs help." He looked at the building ahead, the glass tower where his future was waiting. Then he looked back at the old woman struggling in the road. His breath caught in his throat. He ran toward her. "Ma'am, wait. Don't move," he called out, dodging cars as he rushed to her side. He picked up the fallen apples, helped her stand straight, and guided her to the sidewalk. "Are you okay?" he asked, breathing heavily. The old woman nodded, but her voice shook. "Thank you, son. I didn't expect anyone to stop." He smiled faintly. No one should have to ask for help. Her hands trembled as she tried to pick up her groceries. He noticed her shoes were worn out and her coat looked too thin for the weather. He quickly took the bag from her and said, "Please let me carry this for you." She hesitated, then nodded. "I live just a few blocks away, but I don't want to bother you." "It's no bother," he said, though his eyes darted toward his watch. It was 8:45. The interview was starting in 15 minutes. He took a deep breath. "Let's go." They walked slowly down the street. The old woman moved carefully, each step small and shaky. She talked a little, mostly about how she didn't have many visitors anymore, how her son worked far away and rarely called. Her words were quiet but full of loneliness. He listened even though his mind was racing. With every passing minute he felt the opportunity slipping away. But there was something in her voice, something fragile, that kept him from rushing. When they reached her small apartment building, she turned to him with a grateful smile. "You're very kind. Most people don't even look at me." He shook his head. "I just did what anyone should do." She smiled again and said softly, No, son. Not everyone would. He helped her place the groceries on the table inside her tiny apartment. The place was clean but simple, filled with old furniture and faded photos. There was one picture on the shelf of a young man in a suit, standing proudly beside a tall glass building. She caught him looking at it and smiled. "That's my son," she said with a hint of pride. "He's very busy these days." He nodded politely, not knowing what to say. "Would you like a cup of tea?" She asked kindly. He looked at his phone again. 9:15. The interview was over. His heart sank, but he didn't want to show it. "Thank you," he said gently, "but I should get going." She held his hand for a moment. "The world needs more men like you." Her words hit him deeper than he expected. He smiled weakly, said goodbye, and walked out into the cold air. As he walked back toward the main road, his legs felt heavy. He didn't even bother running anymore. The interview was lost. The dream was gone. He reached the bus stop and sat on the bench watching cars go by. His heart felt hollow. He imagined his little boy waiting by the window, hoping to hear good news. How was he going to tell him that he failed again? After a few minutes, he stood up and walked slowly home. The city felt louder now, like the world was moving forward without him. He kept replaying the morning in his head, the car breaking down, the old woman's trembling hands, the look of relief in her eyes. He couldn't decide if he had done the right thing. When he reached his building, he paused at the door. He took a deep breath and pushed it open. Inside, his son was sitting on the floor, coloring on an old notebook. The boy's face lit up when he saw his father. "Dad, did you get the job?" The single dad hesitated. He forced a small smile. "Not this time, buddy. But it's okay." The little boy frowned. "Why not?" He knelt down beside him and brushed his hair softly. "Because sometimes helping someone is more important than getting what you want." The boy didn't fully understand, but he hugged his dad tightly. "You're still the best dad ever." That simple sentence broke the last bit of sadness left in him. He smiled, hugging his son back. "And you're the best thing that ever happened to me." Later that night, he cooked a small dinner, just rice and a few vegetables. They sat together, laughing about little things. The disappointment still lingered inside him, but the warmth of that tiny apartment made it easier to bear. When his son fell asleep, he sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The streetlights glowed softly and the cold wind brushed his face. He thought about the old woman again, her kind smile, her lonely eyes, the way she had called him son. He didn't know why, but he hoped she was safe and warm tonight. He leaned back, closed his eyes and whispered to himself, Maybe everything happens for a reason." He didn't know that miles away in a large mansion on the other side of town, that same old woman sat by her window, sipping tea and thinking about him. Her driver had told her about the man who helped her, how he refused any money, and how he ran off quietly after making sure she was safe. She smiled softly and whispered, "There's still goodness in this world." And though he didn't know it yet, the kindness he showed that morning would soon change both of their lives forever. The next morning, the small apartment felt quieter than usual. The single dad woke up early, but there was no rush in his steps this time. The excitement that once filled his mornings was gone, replaced by a dull heaviness. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, wondering how he was going to tell his little boy that the rent was due again, and there was barely any money left. He rubbed his tired eyes and went to the kitchen. The breakfast table was empty except for a half loaf of bread and a jar of jam that was almost finished. He spread the thinnest layer he could, trying to make it look enough for both of them. His son came running out of the room, cheerful as always, holding a drawing in his small hands. "Dad, look! I drew you going to your new job." The drawing showed him smiling in front of a big building, wearing a tie and holding a briefcase. For a second, his heart ached. He forced a smile and said softly, "That's really good, buddy. You'll be a great artist one day." The boy grinned proudly. "So when do you start work?" He didn't know how to answer that. He didn't want to break his son's hope. "Soon," he said gently. "Maybe not that job, but another one will come." He didn't want his child to see the worry on his face, so he quickly changed the subject. "Come on, finish breakfast or you'll be late for school." After walking his son to school, he stopped by a nearby cafe to look at the job board. The same old notices were there: part-time cleaner, delivery helper, and a few temporary warehouse jobs. None paid enough, but he couldn't be picky anymore. He took down a few numbers from the flyers and made calls. But all he heard was, "Sorry, position's already filled," or "We'll get back to you." Nobody ever did. By noon, he sat at a park bench with a paper cup of cheap coffee in his hands. He looked at people passing by, men in suits, women with briefcases, young people laughing, all moving toward something better. He wondered if life would ever move in his favor again. He thought about the old woman he had helped the day before. He didn't even know her name, but her gentle smile stayed in his mind. Somehow, helping her still felt like the only thing that had gone right in a long time. Meanwhile, across town, that same woman sat by her window, staring out at the bright morning. The sunlight fell softly on her face. She had told her caretaker about the man who helped her and how kind he was. "He looked tired," she said quietly. Like he was fighting his own battles, her caretaker smiled. "There aren't many people like that anymore, ma'am." The old woman nodded slowly. "I want to find him," she said suddenly. "He didn't tell me his name, but I need to thank him properly." Her caretaker looked surprised. "Do you remember where he said he was going?" She shook her head. "No, but he mentioned he had a job interview near the city center. Maybe that's a place to start." She made a few calls, asking drivers and guards near the area if anyone remembered a man helping an old woman with groceries. Most didn't know. But one guard at a crosswalk remembered a man stopping traffic to help someone cross the road that morning. The description matched. The old woman smiled faintly. "If it's meant to be, I'll meet him again." Days passed. The single dad kept searching for jobs, picking up small gigs wherever he could. One day, he helped fix shelves in a store. Another day, he helped unload boxes for a moving company. The pay was little, but at least it kept food on the table. Still, every night before bed, he would sit by the window, staring out at the city lights, thinking about what could have been. One evening, as he was helping his son with homework, his phone buzzed. It was a call from an unknown number. "Hello?" he answered carefully. "Good afternoon," said a polite voice. "I'm calling from the company you applied to last week. We've scheduled another round of interviews for the position you were interested in. Are you still available?" His heart jumped. "Yes, sir, absolutely." "Great, please come in tomorrow morning at 9. He could hardly breathe from relief. Maybe this was a second chance. Maybe missing the first interview hadn't ruined everything after all. He thanked the caller again and again before hanging up. He turned to his son with a wide smile. "Guess what, buddy? Dad got another interview." The little boy jumped up, laughing and clapping his hands. "See, I told you you'd get it, Dad." That night, they celebrated with instant noodles and soda, a small meal that felt like a feast. Before sleeping, he laid out his shirt again, the same one he wore last time. He ironed it carefully, cleaned his shoes once more, and practiced his answers in the mirror. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow nothing will stop me." Morning came early. He left his son at school, patted his head, and promised, "When I come back, things will be better." The bus ride to the company felt longer than usual. Every stop made his heart beat faster. When he finally reached the tall glass building, he took a deep breath and walked in. The receptionist smiled politely. "You're here for the second interview?" "Yes," he said, his voice slightly nervous. "Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." He sat in the waiting area with a few others, his hands clasped tightly together. He tried to steady his breathing. Then a man in a suit came out and called his name. He stood up quickly and followed him down the hallway. The man opened a door to a large office and gestured for him to sit. Inside, the room was quiet, with tall windows overlooking the city. Behind the desk sat a man who looked calm but serious, the CEO himself. "Good morning," said the CEO. "I wanted to meet you personally." The single dad was surprised. "Thank you, sir." "It's an honor." The CEO smiled faintly. "I understand you missed your previous interview." "Yes, sir. I had an unexpected situation. I truly apologize for that." The CEO leaned forward slightly. "Would you like to tell me what happened?" He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should make up an excuse. But something in the CEO's expression told him the truth would be better. He took a deep breath. "On my way here that morning, I saw an old woman who fell in the street. No one was helping her, and I couldn't just walk past. I helped her home, but by the time I got here, it was too late." The room was silent for a moment. The CEO didn't speak right away. He just studied the man quietly, as if trying to read something deeper behind his words. "You helped an old woman?" he asked finally. "Yes, sir," he said softly. I know it sounds foolish. I should have thought about my interview, but I just couldn't leave her there. The CEO leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Can you describe her? She was wearing a long gray coat and used a wooden cane, the man said carefully. She had kind eyes. She smiled a lot, even though she seemed lonely. The CEO's face changed slightly. His eyes widened just a bit and his fingers stopped moving on the desk. For a moment, he looked like he had seen a ghost. He cleared his throat. I see, thank you for being honest. The man nodded. I didn't do it for any reason, sir. It just felt like the right thing to do. The CEO smiled faintly. Not many people would do that. After asking a few more questions about his experience and background, the CEO stood up and said, That's all for today. We'll contact you soon. The single dad shook his hand firmly and said, Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Then he left the office, feeling uncertain but hopeful. As soon as the door closed, the CEO sat down heavily, still thinking about what he had heard. The description, the cane, the gray coat, the soft smile, it all matched his mother. He immediately called his assistant. Get my mother on the phone, he said. A few moments later, her voice came through the line. Yes, dear? Mother, can I ask you something? He said carefully. Did you meet someone a few days ago? Someone who helped you on the street? There was a short pause, then she laughed softly. You heard about my little adventure? Yes, a kind young man helped me when I fell. He even carried my groceries home. What was his name? The CEO asked quickly. Oh, I don't think he told me, she said. But he said he was going to an interview. Why? The CEO's voice softened. Because, Mother, he just came in today. The old woman went silent. Then she said softly, He's a good man. Don't let that kind heart go unnoticed. The CEO smiled to himself. I won't. That evening, the single dad returned home, tired but lighter than before. His son ran to him and asked eagerly, How did it go? He lifted him into his arms and smiled. I think it went okay, buddy. I think it really did. He didn't know that far across the city. His story had already touched two hearts, the CEO's and his mother's. And what was about to come would change his life in ways he never imagined. He sat by the window again that night, watching the stars. Somewhere deep inside, he felt something new. Not luck, but faith. Maybe, just maybe, this time things were finally turning around. The next few days felt longer than usual for the single dad. Every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it was a call from the company. He checked his messages again and again, waiting for some good news. But each time, the screen stayed silent. Still, he refused to give up hope. He kept telling himself, maybe they're still deciding. Each morning, he woke up early, took his son to school, and went around town searching for part-time work. He couldn't sit idle. He helped at a small repair shop for a few days, earning just enough to buy food and keep the lights on. Life wasn't easy, but he kept moving. He knew if he stopped, everything would fall apart. In the evenings, he would come home tired, but still smiling for his little boy. They would sit together, share dinner, and talk about small dreams. The boy often asked, Dad, when you get your job, can we buy a big cake? And the dad would laugh softly and say, the biggest one they have. Meanwhile, in a quiet office high above the city, the CEO couldn't stop thinking about the man from the interview. His story had stayed in his mind like a song that wouldn't fade. The image of that morning, his mother struggling on the street, kept replaying in his head. He had been too busy that day to visit her, and if not for that stranger, something terrible might have happened. The next day, he decided to confirm everything himself. He drove to his mother's house and asked her to tell him again about the man who helped her. She smiled when she spoke of him, her voice filled with warmth. He reminded me of you, she said softly. The way he spoke, the way he cared, it's rare these days. Her words made the CEO think even more deeply. He wanted to know the man's full story, who he was, how he lived, and why someone with such kindness had been struggling for work. He called his assistant and said, Find that man. I want to know everything about him, where he lives, his background, his family, but do it quietly. A few days later, the assistant returned with a file. The CEO opened it carefully. Inside was everything: his address, employment history, even the note that said he was a single father raising a young son alone after losing his wife years ago. The CEO's eyes softened as he read through the pages. He leaned back in his chair and whispered to himself, all this time, he's been fighting alone. He closed the file and stared out of the window. Then he picked up the phone and made a call to the HR department. I want that man hired, he said firmly. And not just as an employee. Give him a position that matches his potential. The HR manager hesitated. But sir, we have other candidates in line. The CEO interrupted gently, but with authority. Trust me on this one. He's the kind of person we need here. That evening, as the single dad was cooking dinner, his phone finally rang. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. Hello? Good evening, said a cheerful voice. This is from the company you interviewed with last week. We're pleased to inform you that you've been selected for the position. Congratulations. He froze for a moment, not believing his ears. I got the job? Yes, sir, the voice confirmed. You'll start next Monday. Please come by the office tomorrow to sign your documents. Tears welled up in his eyes as he said, thank you, again and again. After hanging up, he stood still for a moment, then laughed out loud, a sound full of relief and joy. His son came running out of the bedroom. Dad, what happened? He picked him up, spinning him around. We did it, buddy. I got the job. The boy squealed with happiness. Really? Can we buy the big cake now? He laughed through his tears. Yes, we can buy the biggest one they have. That night, their small apartment felt brighter. They didn't have much, but the feeling of hope filled every corner. The single dad stayed awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, smiling to himself. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel lost. The next morning, he put on his best shirt and went to the office to sign the papers. When he entered the tall glass building again, it felt different, like he belonged there this time. The receptionist greeted him warmly and handed him a folder. While he waited for the paperwork, the CEO happened to walk by. Their eyes met, and the CEO smiled. Good to see you again, he said. The single dad stood up quickly. Good morning, sir. Thank you for giving me this chance. The CEO shook his hand firmly. You earned it. He didn't understand what that meant at first, but the CEO's eyes carried something more than just politeness. Something almost personal. After finishing the formalities, he went back home, his heart lighter than ever. He told his son, Next week I start work. Things are going to change. The boy hugged him tightly. I'm proud of you, Dad. The following Monday, he arrived at the office early. He was nervous but determined. He was introduced to his team, shown around, and given his desk. Everything felt new and overwhelming, but in the best way possible. He worked hard from the very first day, listening, learning, and helping wherever he could. People noticed his dedication. Even when things got tough, he stayed calm and focused. Days turned into weeks. He was finally earning enough to cover the rent and buy better meals. He even bought his son a small toy car, something the boy had wanted for months. Life was still simple, but it was better. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. The receptionist came to his desk and said, Sir, someone's here asking for you. He looked up, confused. For me? Yes, she said with a smile. An elderly lady. He stood up immediately, his heart skipping a beat. Could it be? He walked to the lobby, and there she was. The old woman he had helped that day. She was wearing the same gentle smile. He hurried to greet her. Ma'am, it's so good to see you again. How did you find me? She laughed softly. It wasn't easy, but my son helped. He blinked in surprise. Your son? She nodded. Yes, dear. My son owns this company. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The realization hit him like a wave. The CEO, the man who had interviewed him, the man who gave him the job, was her son. She looked at him kindly. When I told him about you, he said he had already met you. I told him you were special. I'm glad he listened. He was speechless, his eyes wide. I didn't know, ma'am. She smiled again. You didn't help me for any reason. You did it because you have a good heart. That's what makes you worthy of everything good that's happening now. The CEO soon joined them, smiling as he saw the two together. I guess now you know the truth, he said. The single dad nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. Sir, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, the CEO replied. Just keep being the person you are. People like you are rare. The old woman reached out and patted his hand gently. You reminded me that kindness still exists. I'll never forget that. After she left, he went back to his desk, but the world around him felt brighter. He realized that sometimes doing the right thing, even when it costs you, brings blessings you could never imagine. That evening, he came home with a smile so wide that his son immediately asked, Something good happened again, didn't it? He laughed and sat beside him. You know that old lady I helped before? Her son is my boss. The boy's eyes went wide. Really? That's crazy? He chuckled. Yeah, life can be funny like that. They celebrated again that night, eating cake just like they had promised. The boy drew another picture before bed, this time of him and his dad standing beside a big building holding hands with a smiling old lady. As the single dad tucked his son into bed, he whispered, Remember this, buddy. Never ignore someone who needs help. You never know what kind of good it might bring. Later, as he sat by the window once more, he looked out at the city lights. The journey had been long, painful, and uncertain, but every struggle had led him exactly where he needed to be. And somewhere across town, the old woman sat in her living room smiling quietly to herself. Her son was busy again, but now she didn't feel alone. She knew there was a man out there, a single father, whose kindness had not only changed her life, but also reminded her son of what truly mattered. That night, both of them slept peacefully, their hearts full of quiet gratitude. The world, for once, felt just right. The morning of the interview felt different. The air outside was calm, the sky was clear, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel rushed. He had been called again by the same company that once turned him away after he missed the interview. This time, they said there was another opening, and his profile had been reconsidered. It almost felt like a second chance, something he hadn't dared to hope for. He got dressed carefully, wearing the same old suit that had been cleaned and ironed many times. It wasn't new or stylish, but it was all he had, and he wore it with pride. His little boy watched him from the corner of the small room, smiling sleepily. You're gonna get it this time, Dad, the boy said in a sleepy voice. He smiled back and ruffled his son's hair. We'll see, buddy. Just say a little prayer for me. On the way to the office, his hands wouldn't stop trembling. He couldn't tell if it was fear or excitement, maybe both. The last time he stood near that building, he was too late, and he remembered the feeling of failure so clearly. He had helped an old lady that day, a stranger who looked helpless on the road. And though he never regretted it, it had cost him his one big opportunity. He often wondered what happened to her afterward, but he had no way of knowing. When he walked into the building this time, everything felt quieter. The receptionist recognized him and smiled. Oh, it's you again, she said warmly. Please wait a moment, they'll call you soon. He nodded, grateful that she remembered him. He sat down in the waiting area, breathing slowly, staring at the floor as people rushed past. His heart was pounding hard in his chest. After a few minutes, the door opened and a man in a dark suit stepped out. His presence was commanding, but his face was calm and kind. Mr. Daniels, he said, extending a hand. Please come in. The poor dad stood up quickly, unsure how to respond. He didn't expect someone that important to personally come for him. Inside the office, everything looked grand, polished furniture, big windows, and a city view that stretched for miles. He sat down carefully in front of the large desk, his hands clasped tightly together. The man sitting across from him was the CEO of the company. He had heard the name before, a man known for being strict but fair. So, the CEO began, glancing at a file. You were scheduled for an interview here 2 weeks ago, but you didn't show up. Do you mind telling me what happened? The dad swallowed hard. This was the question he feared the most. He could have made up an excuse, a car accident, a family emergency, but he knew that lying never led anywhere good. He looked the CEO straight in the eye and said softly, I was on my way here that morning, sir, but I saw an old woman struggling on the road. She had dropped her things and people were walking past her. I couldn't just leave her there, so I helped her. By the time I got here, the interview was over. The CEO leaned back in his chair, silent. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't look angry, more curious than anything. "You missed an important opportunity," he said after a pause. "Most people would have chosen the interview over a stranger." The dad nodded. "I know, sir. I thought about that too. But I kept imagining if it were my mother in her place. I just couldn't walk away." The CEO looked down at the file again, pretending to read it, but his mind was elsewhere. There was something strange about what he'd just heard. He looked up slowly. "Tell me," he asked, "do you remember what she looked like?" The dad thought for a moment. "She had kind eyes," he said. "Gray hair, a little weak on her feet. She was carrying groceries. One of the bags tore and things fell out. She said she was fine, but she wasn't. I helped her pick everything up and called a cab for her. She didn't have her phone with her." The CEO's heart skipped a beat. That description, it sounded too familiar. His mother had told him something similar just a few days ago. She had come home that day talking about a man who helped her when no one else did. She described how gentle he was, how he reminded her of the kind of people she wished her son hired: humble, sincere, honest. The CEO's throat tightened slightly. He stood up suddenly, walked to the window, and stared outside for a few seconds. His reflection on the glass looked calm, but inside his thoughts were racing. Could it really be the same man? He turned back to the poor dad, who was sitting nervously, thinking maybe he had said something wrong. The CEO picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Mom," he said when she answered, "can you describe again the man who helped you the other day?" The dad looked confused, unsure what was happening. The CEO listened carefully as his mother spoke on the phone. Her voice was calm and cheerful. "Oh yes," she said. "He was such a kind young man. He had a warm smile, brown eyes, a little worn-out jacket, and a child's photo in his wallet. He even helped me into the cab." The CEO's eyes widened slightly. He looked at the man sitting across from him. It was him. It had to be. His mother's description matched perfectly. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling something stir deep inside. Guilt, respect, surprise, all mixed together. He hung up the phone and took a slow breath before sitting down again. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The CEO finally said quietly, "That old lady you helped was my mother." The poor dad froze. "Your mother?" he said, almost whispering. The CEO nodded. "Yes, she told me about you. She couldn't stop talking about how kind you were, even when you were clearly in a hurry. She said you reminded her that good people still exist." The room fell silent again. The dad didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure if this was good or bad. But the CEO suddenly smiled, a warm, genuine smile. He reached out his hand. "You didn't miss your opportunity," he said softly. "You earned it that day." The dad blinked, stunned. He hesitated for a moment before shaking the CEO's hand. His heart felt heavy, his eyes almost filling with tears. The CEO continued, "We need people like you in this company, people who care about others, not just themselves. That's what real leadership is." The dad tried to speak, but his voice broke. "Thank you, sir. I didn't expect—" He stopped, struggling for words. "I know," the CEO said gently, "but sometimes the right things happen in unexpected ways." He handed the dad a paper. "You'll start next week," he said. "Your role will be assistant manager. And don't worry, we'll make sure your son never goes hungry again." For a moment, the poor dad just sat there, unable to move. His hands trembled as he held the paper. It didn't feel real. All the pain, the sleepless nights, the worry, suddenly it all felt worth it. He stood up slowly, his eyes wet but shining. "Thank you," he whispered again, his voice breaking with emotion. The CEO stood too, placing a hand on his shoulder. "My mother always says that kindness has a way of coming back," he said softly. "I didn't believe it until now." When the dad walked out of the building that day, the world looked different. The air felt lighter, the sun seemed brighter, and for the first time in a long while, he felt proud of who he was. He didn't just get a job, he got his dignity back. Outside, he pulled out his phone and called home. His son picked up immediately. "Dad, how was it?" the boy asked, full of excitement. The dad smiled, his voice soft. "You were right, buddy. I got it," the boy shouted with joy on the other end, and the dad laughed for the first time in days. As he walked down the busy street, people rushed past him, the same way they had that day when he stopped to help the old woman. But this time he knew that doing the right thing, no matter how small, always had meaning. That night, the CEO visited his mother. She was sitting in her favorite chair, sipping tea. When he told her what had happened, she smiled knowingly. "I told you," she said gently. "That man had something special. You just needed to see it." The CEO nodded slowly. "You were right, Mom. You always are." She looked at him with soft eyes. "Promise me one thing," she said. "Never judge someone by what they wear or where they come from. The richest hearts often live in the poorest hands." He smiled faintly, taking her hand. "I promise." Across the city, in a small apartment, the poor dad sat beside his son, watching the little boy eat happily. For the first time in a long while, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. He whispered quietly to himself, "Maybe missing that interview was the best thing that ever happened to me." He didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. Kindness had changed his life. And it all started with one simple choice to help a stranger. The first morning at his new job felt almost unreal. He woke up before sunrise, sitting on the edge of his bed for a few seconds, just staring at the floor. For years, every morning had started with worry. How to earn, how to feed his son, how to keep going. But that morning, things were different. For the first time, he felt peace. He looked over at his little boy still sleeping, holding his worn-out toy car close to his chest. The sight made him smile. He quietly got ready, put on his neatly pressed shirt and tied his old but clean tie. Before leaving, he placed a kiss on his son's forehead and whispered, "It's going to be a good day." When he reached the company building, he stood outside for a moment, looking up at it. The glass window sparkled in the sunlight, and people in formal suits walked in with confident steps. A few weeks ago, he had stood at the same spot, hopeless and defeated. Now he was walking through those doors not as a visitor, but as an employee. Inside, everyone treated him with respect. The receptionist, who once barely noticed him, now smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard," she said. His heart swelled with gratitude as he nodded and walked in. His new office wasn't big or fancy, but to him, it was everything. There was a desk, a computer, and a chair that actually turned without squeaking. He ran his hand gently over the polished surface, whispering, "Thank you." Soon the CEO walked in. His expression was calm as always, but there was a touch of warmth in his tone. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "I'm just grateful, sir," the dad replied quietly. The CEO nodded. "You earned this. Don't ever forget that." Over the next few weeks, the dad worked harder than anyone else. He came early, stayed late, and learned quickly. He never complained, never acted like he knew more than others. His dedication caught everyone's attention. Even senior employees started respecting him. One afternoon, the CEO invited him to lunch in his private office. It wasn't common for him to do that, so the dad was nervous. But when he walked in, he was surprised to see the CEO's mother there too, the same old lady he had helped that day. She smiled warmly when she saw him. "Oh, it's you," she said, her eyes lighting up. "I've been wanting to thank you properly. You saved me that day," he smiled shyly. "It was nothing, ma'am. I just did what anyone should do." The CEO's mother shook her head. "Not everyone would have stopped. You gave up your big day for someone you didn't even know. That says everything about you." The CEO watched quietly, smiling at his mother's words. She turned to her son and said, "Take care of him. People like him make this world better." The CEO nodded. "I plan to, Mom." From that day on, their bond grew stronger. The old lady often invited him and his son to her home for dinner. She treated the little boy like her own grandchild. Every time he visited, she made sure the boy left with a full stomach and a small gift, a toy car, a warm jacket, or a box of chocolates. The boy adored her, calling her grandma without hesitation. One evening, the dad found himself sitting in the big dining room of their house, feeling a little out of place but deeply thankful. The old lady noticed his quietness and said gently, "You don't have to feel different here. You're family now." He didn't know what to say. All he could do was smile, though his eyes were slightly wet. Months passed and life slowly began to change for him. His small apartment turned into a better one, still modest but warm and comfortable. His son got into a better school, and every morning the dad walked him there, holding his hand, feeling proud that he could finally give his boy the childhood he deserved. He saved every penny carefully. He didn't buy fancy clothes or a new car. Instead, he started putting a little aside each month, dreaming of one day owning a small house where his son could play freely. At work, he became known for his honesty and kindness. Whenever someone was in trouble, he was the first to help. One day, a young intern dropped coffee all over a client's documents and started crying, thinking she would be fired. He didn't yell or scold her. Instead, he calmly helped her clean up, reassured her, and even stayed late to redo the entire file with her. The CEO happened to see it and smiled silently, realizing again that hiring him had been one of the best decisions he ever made. One afternoon, while he was finishing up some reports, the CEO called him into the office. "You've been doing incredible work," he said. "I think it's time for a promotion." The dad froze. "Sir, me?" "Yes," the CEO said with a nod. "You've proven yourself every day. You're not just an employee here. You're someone who lifts everyone around you." He tried to hold back his tears but couldn't. "I don't know how to thank you," he said softly. The CEO smiled. "You already did. The day you stopped for my mother, you thanked me more than you'll ever know." That night, when he reached home, his son was waiting at the door like always. "How was work, Dad?" He lifted his son up in his arms and spun him around. "Guess what? Your dad got promoted." The boy laughed with joy. "Does that mean we can buy a bigger bed?" He laughed too, hugging his son tightly. "Yes, maybe even a house one day." Years went by. The dad grew within the company, respected by everyone. His story became something of a legend among the employees. How a poor single father got his chance by helping someone without expecting anything in return. It became a story that inspired others to be kind, to stay honest, to never lose hope. The CEO's mother grew older, but she always asked about him and his son. She loved having them over on weekends. One evening, as they sat in her garden watching the sunset, she looked at him and said, "Do you know why that day mattered so much to me?" He shook his head. "Because I had been feeling invisible," she said softly. "People saw me as an old woman with money, nothing more. But you saw me as a person. You treated me with care without asking for anything in return. That's rare." He looked at her, touched by her words. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "That day changed my life too," she smiled. "Sometimes we cross paths with people for reasons we don't understand. Maybe that day we were meant to find each other." He nodded slowly. He believed it too. A few months later, he finally bought a small house. Nothing fancy, but it had 2 bedrooms, a little garden, and a window where his son could watch the stars. The first night they moved in, they sat together on the floor eating simple food, laughing and talking about everything they had been through. The boy looked at his father and said, "Dad, do you think Grandma will visit?" He smiled. "Of course she will. She's family now," and she did. The next weekend, the old lady came over, walking slowly with her cane but smiling the whole time. When she saw the new house, tears filled her eyes. "You did it," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." He didn't know how to respond. He just hugged her, feeling like everything had come full circle. As years passed, the boy grew up, went to college, and often told his friends the story of his father, the man who missed an interview but found something much bigger. Whenever he talked about it, his eyes shone with pride. The dad never forgot where he came from. He never lost his humility. He often said, "Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can change everything." And people who knew his story believed it because they saw it happen before their eyes. Sometimes, late at night, he would sit by the window of his new home, looking out at the city lights. His mind would wander back to that one moment, the torn grocery bag, the traffic, the trembling hands as he helped the old woman stand. If he had walked past her that day, his life would have stayed the same, small, struggling, uncertain. But because he stopped, everything changed. He smiled quietly, whispering to himself, maybe missing that interview wasn't bad luck after all. Maybe it was fate. The soft hum of the city filled the air as he leaned back, watching the stars blink above the rooftops. Somewhere out there, the world kept moving fast, but he had learned something precious. Sometimes, slowing down for someone in need is what truly moves your life forward. And so, his story became more than just a story. It became a reminder that no act of kindness is ever wasted. Because even when life doesn't go as planned, goodness always finds its way back.